So iOS 16 is the last version of software that Apple went ahead and basically released. Now, this is the first time I've done a video like this in a long time, but because iOS 17 is the latest and greatest from Apple, should you go ahead and still be on iOS 16 on your particular iPhone? And or should you go ahead and actually replace your iOS 16 iPhone? Let's say you have an iPhone 10, 8, or 8 Plus. Should you go ahead and replace it for that newer device like the iPhone 11 or iPhone 10R that is still supported on iOS 17? Now, the first thing I'd always tell everyone, if you have the capability and you have the funds to go do so, I would always recommend going up to the latest and greatest iPhone, or at least an iPhone that's still supported with software. With an iOS 16 iPhone, if you cannot go up to iOS 17, your best bet is to be prepared to go ahead and upgrade at some point. If you're still one version behind for like 6 months or so, it's not the biggest deal in the world, but if you're like a year behind, 2 years behind in terms of software updates, that's when you can start seeing big changes, big differences, and that's when you may start running into some problems within your particular version of software. So keep that in mind. So that's kind of an overarching thing kind of going throughout this whole entire video. The big thing though, I'll tell you though, is that at the core, iOS 16 still has a lot of capability and a lot of power. Although you are missing out on some big crucial features that were brought in within iOS 17, I would still say from a stability standpoint, iOS 16 is still very good for the most part, and you're not really going to be missing out on too much, I would say from like an overarching standpoint from iOS 16 to iOS 17, beyond than just like the standard capability and the standard issues that you may be running into. Now, if you have, let's say, an iPhone 11 or iPhone 12 or iPhone 13, and you're still on iOS 16, I would probably recommend going through and actually upgrading to iOS 17 as soon as possible, mostly because iOS 18 is going to be coming around in the next couple of months, and you don't want to go from iOS 16 to iOS 18. That's another thing to keep in mind. But if you have the capability of going up to iOS 17, you can go ahead and just upgrade at that point, and then but if you are already on iOS 16 and you have the capability of going up to iOS 17, you probably want to go and upgrade as soon as possible, like I said. At least that way you can go and take advantage of all those iOS 17 features. Now, iOS 16 in and of itself is still very interesting right now because we are still basically getting security updates on this version of software. So this is something that's super cool and something awesome that you can get on this particular device, because you can easily just go ahead and still continue to get iOS updates and iOS features on iOS 16. And this in and of itself is a very, very cool thing, because you won't have to go ahead and upgrade to iOS 17 if you don't want to. And if you don't have an iPhone 10 or above, and you're still stuck on like an iPhone 11, or let's say you're stuck on an iPhone 10 or 8 Plus or 8, you can still get some security and software updates from that particular standpoint too. I still think iOS 16 is pretty much still worth using for some people out there. I think, from the overlapping features, you can still download and install applications from the Apple App Store. You can still utilize a lot of features and capability that we already had before. So there really isn't like too much you're missing out on from like a basic capability standpoint. But once iOS 16 starts getting about like 3 versions behind, so once iOS 19 comes around, iOS 20 comes around, there's going to be lots and lots of features that are just going to be sunsetted on iOS 16. And if you do have an iOS 16 device, well, then that maybe end up causing some issues for some people out there, because you're not going to be able to install applications and whatnot. So that right there is another big thing to keep in mind. Beyond that though, I think if you still want to, you can stay on iOS 16, but be prepared very soon to go and upgrade to iOS 17 as soon as possible. So that pretty much covers it up here. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.